Welcome to Cranfield University and Cranfield School of Management. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us. My name is Toby Thompson. I'm the studio director here in the glorious Grenville Turner Studios at Cranfield University. So thank you again for joining us. We're going to be together for, I reckon, about no more than an hour, maybe less than an hour. So hopefully you can stick that out. And if you're watching the recording, you missed an amazing live event, but stick with the recording because it's going to be interesting what's coming up. We're going to be talking about deshopping today. It's going to be an interactive session, so pretty much at any time in the next hour, if you're on the live event, please type your questions into the text chat. I'm sure this is your second or third Zoom event today. You know how text chat works. No audio questions, just text chat questions. They can be observations, challenges, thoughts. Just share those with us. And we'll do our level best. I'll do my best to put them to the speaker today, and we'll see how that goes. So, and if you want to tell me where you are in the world, we are always really keen to hear that. So put something in the text chat telling us where you are. It gives me fantastic pleasure to welcome Dr. Tamira King, who's joining us on the sofa today. You are a guru, I think it's fair to say. We're going to have Tamira staying with us and doing some slides. So Tamira is the person. Tamira, you've got to introduce us. Tell us how you got into deshopping before we go even into what deshopping is.
Okay, morning everyone. So I'll tell you a little bit firstly about what deshopping is, so you know how I got into it. So deshopping is when somebody buys something, wears it or uses it, and then returns it intentionally. So I was drawn with excitement to this research when I was at Manchester University doing my postgraduate degree, thinking, gosh, I am very aware of this behaviour and it's very, very prevalent. And that led to doing further research with consumers and companies over the last decade on the massive growth of returns, the massive growth in fraudulent returns across all different categories. What sparked my interest even further was working with the companies and trying to find solutions and trying to change consumer behaviour in a positive way.
So now you're a thought leader in deshopping.
Well, thanks.
Goodness me, and you've been on LBC, you've been on BBC talking about this. Say more about that.
I have done a few interviews live on LBC and for TV programmes, as we were talking about before. Yes, and also I spoke once with the CEO of Asda live on the radio where they were talking about the growth in returns and supporting the research going forward and trying to help support trying to understand consumer behaviour and how to change it in a positive way.
I know you've got a ton of slides and we're going to see that very shortly, but why now? Why deshopping now? What's the big deal? Why is it suddenly big?
Well, I'll show you through the slides the massive growth of returns, especially since the post-pandemic, especially since the growth and the boom in online retail and the way it's easy for people now to buy online and then return, which they're very entitled to do. But the challenges this creates for companies, because companies now thrive on being competitive. It's so important to have good customer service, good returns policies to maintain great competitive advantage. So the challenge is real to try and actually minimise returns whilst giving great customer service. And that creates a dichotomy for companies. And I'll give you some examples throughout the slides of companies, you know, where they've got problems and the research that we've done with some companies on returns to help try and reduce and manage the behaviour a bit better.
You've thought a lot about this, and it's a global phenomenon because we have people, and thank you for putting in the text chat. If you haven't already, just tell us where you are in the text chat. Austria, Portugal, Thailand, India, Taiwan, Hong Kong, UK, someone from the UK. Fantastic to hear you. So there's a fantastic global audience. Yeah. Again, if you're watching the recording, please stick to the very end because this is something you're going to learn something from. I'm going to learn something from it. So if I did some de-shopping, it's not that I'm not shopping. I'm shopping, but I'm shopping for the wrong reasons. Lead us into some of the ideas around de-shopping.
Well, you're shopping because you're enjoying shopping and you're buying into that thing. The interesting thing about de-shopping is you're returning it. So you're getting all that beautiful value, all the materialistic perceptions that you need when you're buying a perfect outfit.
You're looking at my jacket.
Your jacket. You're buying your jacket.
You can see it, but my jacket isn't quite as new as it was, and you can't see it. But if I wanted a new jacket, I would buy it.
You would buy it, but by buying it and wearing it and using it with intention means that you're absorbing all the necessary psychological imagery associated with that jacket. And as am I, watching you wearing that jacket, perceiving certain things about you, and then you're taking the jacket back. So you're being able to buy into all these different products. You're almost taking away that element of newness and then being able to return it.
So there's an essential aspect to this, there's a legal aspect to this,
Yes.
there's a sociological aspect to this.
Yeah, there's a hedonic aspect to it as well. When we're shopping online, actually, there's lots of research that shopping online, we find it very enjoyable, as well as shopping in store with our friends, buying things maybe that we didn't need or want, and maybe thinking, well, we'll try it, we'll wear it.
That?
We'll see how we feel when we're wearing it. And if it doesn't feel quite right, we might take it back.
So we're not just talking about clothes shopping, we're talking about anything. Any sort of shopping
so
at
I've done various research with different retailers that I will highlight throughout the slides. The initial research was on women and clothing, but I have got examples of de-shopping across a range of sectors, from electronics to homeware, and also different categories of retailers, from Argos to Sainsbury's, as well as large clothing retailers. So yes, it's across all categories and sectors.
Wow. So we know that there is a very broad audience joining us here at Cranfield School of Management today. Thank you again for joining us. Stick around, Cranfield School of Management. We know a thing or two about new topics. The Future of Everything series that we have on YouTube and Vimeo looks, as you can see, towards the future. Hopefully this makes you think. So Tamira, there's a bunch of questions already, can you believe it, in the text chat. So if this is making you think, which is the idea of this, please put those thoughts, share those with us, and put a question to Tamira. So Tamira, your slides talk us through the history of it. Where do you start with your de-shopping slides?
The first slide is a definition of what it is and highlights some of the research I found about how prevalent it is.
Okay. And you want everyone in the audience to engage with your research by the sound of it.
Well, firstly, I'll tell you about the consumer research, how we try to understand what motivates consumers, what are their intentions when they're behaving this way. Then I will move into the company research, which is really exciting. It's about cases with companies, about how we've tried to manage the returns better and investigate what their customers are doing.
Wow.
And we've interviewed store managers and we've interviewed customers. So yes, the idea is to get companies to engage more in this research. I've got some highlights of companies throughout the sectors and why it's so important that they get involved in trying to help. Obviously, there's a big push at the moment towards sustainability and how we manage our returns better. So it's really important that consumers are educated, so they know about their returns and what's happening. And they also need to know that it's not just a little bit naughty. There's a lot of damage. There's a lot of damage for retailers.
We want to hear about that.
Yes.
I might interrupt you at some point, but feel free to start that slide pack. I'm really interested in that.
Okay, so here we go. So the first bullet point is just a definition. So it's basically, Piron and Young talked about, it's basically taking that jacket back after it's returned the purpose for which you've bought it. So you bought it for this interview this morning with me. It looks fabulous. You'll take it back. Yeah, you'll take it back tomorrow. But it is actually, in their research, they highlight that it's betraying the retailer. So the retailer's trying to give you, very good customer service, maybe an elongated returns policy, good service at the returns desk when you come back. So you're abusing that as a customer. Schmidt talks about the more hedonic side of the behaviour. She talks about it's like virtual sex. It's like alcohol without the hangover. It's like food without any of the calories, because that's what I was trying to explain. You're getting all the newness of that product and the materialistic associations with it and then taking it back. So I wanted to highlight my research that I did initially, which indicated, you can see we interviewed over 500 women and over 200 admitted to de-shopping. So it's huge. And, you talked a little bit about the sectors. In terms of the consumers, my youngest was 18, doing it with her pocket money, buying things for parties that she couldn't really afford, so she took it back. But my oldest was in her 80s, buying really nice dresses for cruises and then taking them back after the cruises. So it spanned across different age groups. So there's been various academics, you can see on the slide, looking at, is it demographic factors? Somebody identified college students as being more likely because their income level was lower. But I can say that in my research, they came across the sectors. Obviously, I just looked at women and clothing because the research was showing that women return 4 times as much as men.
4 times?
Yeah, that's really because women are much more likely to be gatherers. We like to shop, we like to compare, we don't mind taking it back and going on another shopping spree, whereas men are much more like hunters. They're quick, they go in for the kill. I know what I want, I'm going to buy it now, and probably returning it might be too much trouble. But that's not to say it doesn't happen amongst men, but that was why I was geared to just researching women in the first place. But since then, my research with companies has gone across sectors. So we found, for example, a homeware retailer had a return of a pot of paint with a brick in it. So somebody had painted their room, emptied half the paint, and then put a brick in to replicate the original weight.
Goodness.
So yeah, it does happen across sector. and across all different categories. So, for example, a Mac laptop, buying it, sending it back without the cable, or you've bought it to get the cable, but then you've sent the product back without the cable. So it does happen across sectors.
Or I bought it, I wear it, and I change the stitching here, and then I send it back.
Oh, so there's different things. There's buying it and wearing it and taking it back in perfect condition. And there's also research where people have bought it and then deliberately damaged the item, which means obviously the retailer can't then resell it on the shop floor. And they have to think about doing something alternative, like sending it to a third world country, or potentially now there's loads of sites where you can swap garments or recycle or reuse or repair. We should see growth in these kind of markets where they can deal with these returns in a better way rather than going into landfill. I just wanted to highlight that this research is a lot more current, written by a range of practitioners, really, just to show you the massive increase in online shopping. Like 46% growth in online shopping has led to a massive rapid rise in returns. And that's really important. The quotes are there also show the losses to small business. So I've done research in the UK with this Small Business Research Foundation, and I've got some quotes later which highlight that they feel massively affected by fraudulent returns, but they also feel the pressure to keep up with the big companies. You know, if a big company's got an amazing refund policy, they feel like they have to replicate that, but they can't suffer the damage as much as the big retailers. So they're greatly affected, which is highlighted in that second point there. Royal Mail again did some research saying 75% of clothes bought are returned within 3 months. And KPMG, just to show the bottom slides talking about the growth of it and the amount it attributes to, KPMG said returns cost retailers £7 billion a year.
Wow.
And OpenPay, they research solely on returns, say it costs retailers estimated £5.2 billion a year in the UK. Just to say, there is research in the States as well, which I'll show you on the next slide. So across the world, this is a phenomena. And you can see that in the US, they're claiming returns rose to a remarkable $761 billion in 2021. Yes, it's huge. We're talking huge damage. Just to say, the third point there, 56% of growth in returns are attributed to the increase in online sales. There is research because of COVID and because of the growth of the way we shop online, that there's also been massive returns online. But you can see the quote underneath says only 10.6% of online purchases was deemed to be fraudulent, but that's absolutely huge. And if we could do some research that changed consumer behaviour, work closely with companies and made policies to just reduce that by 5%, it would save an enormous amount of money.
Is that idealistic? You're going to say that's possible, I presume, with your research.
Well, I will say since we started the research, we saw a big change, for example, in Marks and Spencer's handling of returns. So since we first published 10 years ago, they then created their own returns desk. So you used to be able to take back to any till in M&S, and their returns policy was never ending. But now you have to go to the top floor, to the returns desk, where there's trained people that have a look at your garments and discuss with you maybe about why you're returning it and how long you've had it. And they've got a very clear policy. So we have seen rigorous change in some large retailers, but not all retailers, and definitely not across
And do I
the globe.
feel trusted by that retailer, whereas previously maybe I did feel trusted by it? Maybe I don't feel trusted now because they changed that
maybe when you're
policy.
queuing up in that returns till, you now start to get a bit nervous, thinking, am I bringing it back for the right reasons?
And you wander off some other shop.
Yeah. And not everybody can afford to have a specific returns counter with a specific trained person, which was what we called for when we recommended policies out of the first types of research, is that you had trained people dealing with customers and dealing with returns. But you'll see I've done cases with Sainsbury's and Argos, and I'll show you some of the findings. But they found it very difficult to actually understand, when they've got a whole room full of returns, what is deshopped, what is not. But they need to do some serious investigation at that stage.
So if you've got retailers watching today, and hopefully there are, please get in touch, because if you want to find out more, Tamira's the person.
Yeah, please get in touch. Please get involved in the research, and it will only enhance our knowledge and help us reduce the behaviour as well.
Wow, share some more. This is interesting.
Okay. Oh, so this was interesting for me because I was just talking about the growth of returns online. Many retailers suddenly had to learn how to returns things in store and sell mainly online and returns online after COVID. And people started altering their returns policies. So, for example, you could only bring it back if it had labels. But there was research that showed that 52% of people would abandon a basket because they didn't have confidence in the returns policy.
Wow.
So people were really have to give clear and easy returns policies for customers to have confidence. You know, we want to buy and we're entitled to buy and to be able to take something back. So this was interesting for me because ASOS is a pure online player. They don't have stores. So they're the experts at returns. And we should be looking to them for best practice. So in their results published this year, there was this very small statement, which I highlight here. They have a very loyal customer base of engaged, young, fashion-loving consumers. However, a small number of them have disproportionately negatively impacted their profit for over £100 million. So they are aware of this behaviour. They have tried to track consumers' returns behaviour and try to reduce it. But you can see they did that in 2019. But you can see here in the financial year 2022, 6% of active customers generated a loss of £6 per order due to heavy reliance on discounted products, high returns rate. So you can see that this is a problem for the big players that have got great experience. And you can see here, the last point is that they are trying to help customers in their journey have a good experience. And you can see that this is damaging for their profit. It's bad for the customer, it's bad business, and they want to incentivize positive behaviors. So the research we've done is to try and help understand what motivates one to behave like this so that we can improve these behaviors and educate customers as to what it's did a little bit more than a little bit naughty. Interestingly, because if you look at ASOS's results with these young, fashionable, high energetic customers, we had coverage last year in Cosmopolitan. This was the September issue. It was a 3-page spread. Is deshopping killing the high street? And you can see that they've used Amazon parcels for images there. And they give examples of a shopper called Jemima and why she took things back. And I think research that's getting published in publications like this means it's the education is actually reaching those young, high fashion customers. And what this article does beautifully is it tries to engage customers in behaving in a more educated way, in a more sustainable way. It talks about, you know, if you can't afford those dresses, buy them, share them with your friends, thrifting, repairing products, upskilling. It's all about educating customers about being better consumers. Buy less and consume better and learn how to behave better. So I really liked this article on deshopping. That was in the UK, but I wanted to highlight this, which was a few years ago. This is Eve, but it's Eve, which is a magazine we have in the UK, but actually this is actually Eve in Australia. And I don't know if you can see, but on the front page here, they had, it doesn't work really on there, shopping bulimics, which is what they called. It's a really nice imagery for me. It's people digesting all this food and then throwing it back up again and giving it back.
It's a good metaphor.
Yes, it's a very good metaphor. And again, we had a few-page article, but it was picked up in these big magazines in Australia before the UK. So I'm just saying it's across culture. It's across different cultures across the globe. This is interesting. This is to reflect really the deshopping work we did with a large British retail representative organisation. So they represent the independent retailers, and we put questionnaires out in their standard newsletters that they send every season to the independent retailers to see if they felt that they were also affected. It wasn't just the big boys that are suffering. And they were all saying they felt very affected, they were aware of deshopping, and they were always saying they didn't really know how to manage people, train people. And this is a magazine called Draper's Record, which is for clothing industry. And you can see there's a bride returning to the desk asking if she can exchange her bridegroom. So they're making light of, you can bring anything back. But you can see that there's a stroppy letter there on deshopping, reflecting on the publicity around the research and that we did with the British retail associations, saying that they feel really affected by it. And I'm really passionate in my research that the small retailer gets represented and we try to help them and they stay involved in the research and get involved because they suffer greatly. Now, this is interesting because we had an article in The Economist in 2012 and they chose to highlight on people unpicking the seam and how it's a growing problem. And you can see there the quotes in 2009 that the billions. There's only 10 billion then, and you can see up to now we're up to, you know, even more billions. Yeah, Harvard Business Review. So American press is picking up on the research because the research is also published by some American academics. They focus in on the queue and how long the queue is around the corner on a Saturday, you know, busy Saturday afternoon in a big department store in New York. The queue around the corner. It's very interesting. If you think about COVID, we didn't see those big queues in shopping centres, but now we're getting back to that. You are starting to see queues in stores again, and lots of returns customers there. So I just wanted to give you some examples from my deshoppers of what they've done. So the first one, it didn't suit me, so I unpicked the seam around the neck and I took it back and I said it was faulty. I didn't have the receipt and said it was old. So now you see retailers saying it has to have the receipt. Now, if a seam has come undone, that is the fault of the product in the eyes of the retailer. So this is extremely naughty. It's deliberately damaging the product. It makes it in an unresellable condition. So the retailer has to think about, do I reject that return? Do I accept that return? Or if I do accept it, how are we going to reuse this within society? There's the second quote, it's really interesting. If you know you're taking it back, then you don't have to do anything. Nothing's permanent. So I can update my wardrobe and I don't have to spend any money. So this is that shopping bulimic analogy, continually recreating your own identity and changing it. You don't have to commit to what I feel like when I'm wearing this suit, or for example, because I can completely change it. And again, I keep my receipts in a bag, I go through them, I change my clothes. So there is an aspect of this, a small aspect of this, which has a compulsive element to their behaviour. And that is really replicated in the last point, which is when you hand over your money, you're losing. And when you're returning, you're winning. So it's becoming a game between the customer and the retailer. Not all retailers, not all the consumers are that obsessive that they feel like it's a game when they're taking something back. Some may do it once or twice, realise it's naughty, not doing any more. But just to highlight some examples of how they're feeling when they're winning, when they're taking it back, because they won, they got their money back. We did some research with a large clothing organisation where we analysed 3 months worth of returns from 6 of their London stores with a garment technologist. And you can see from evidently under the armpit.
I'm going to say, what are we looking at?
Yes, it's under the armpit is the dirt under the armpit. So you can absolutely tell it's been worn and it's been returned because of a pen mark on the front, which they've highlighted as a fault. You know, it's come with a pen mark, but it's clearly been worn. This retailer called this my little black library of garments. You should have smelt my office filing cabinet drawers. But this is to show that, you know, retailers take this back and they don't do that analysis till afterwards. What I can say from this research is, for example, we were getting 10 cardigans back, for example, with a hole in the same place. And we could categorically say that's been caused by an electronic tag. So you've got to be very careful when you're saying to your customers, have you made that hole? But you only do that analysis, so there's a problem with this garment after they start coming back. So retailers have to be really careful.
They have to have their eyes everywhere.
Yeah.
That's an awful drain on the resources of the retailer.
Yes, at the end of life of a product, supposedly. Yeah. So it's a huge investment for them.
Incredible.
So I want to talk a little bit about the law and how the law really protects customers. It tries to protect retailers as well. But the Sales of Goods Act means you're entitled to take something back if it's not fit for purpose. And you're entitled to do that. And retailers, you know, celebrate that. They want you to know it should be fit, it should be working. If it's a laptop, it should have all the wires in the box, for example. And if it's not right, they want to give you great customer service.
Does that law cover the fact that you shouldn't wear it or use it? You should take it back. It looks about right.
That law protects customers.
So fait accompli, it's done. That's it.
That law is to protect customers when they're buying products that they're fit for purpose. So you don't want to buy your laptop and it doesn't work. The Theft Act is the one, the law that you're referring to, which is about dishonesty.
Right.
So it's basically saying if you are trying to do something dishonest, which gains pecuniary advantage, financial advantage over somebody else, that is deemed as dishonest.
Is it clear where you cross over between honest and dishonest? Is
well,
that
it's
demarked?
About intention. Does it mean that when you're buying the product, you're intending to wear it for the party and then take it back, or the suit for the interview? Or does it mean, not necessarily when you buy it, but when you're taking it back, you're actually aware, I have worn it, but I'm telling her I haven't worn it. Or I'm telling him that it's got a split in the seam that was there when I bought it, and I'm not happy with it. So there, but it's very hard. How can you prove that?
Hence that anxiety in the queue that you mentioned earlier on, that am I going to get through this? Am I going to win this game?
Yeah, am I going to get to keep it? And the Customer Sales and Guarantees Directive is really important because it's about online sales. And all these directives at the bottom on the slide highlight that you're entitled to have those products for a certain period of time before you can decide whether they're suitable and fit for purpose. And with the big growth in online shopping, we as customers want to be protected, and we're entitled to be, and retailers don't want to take that away from us. They're giving us great customer service.
So this legislation is aimed at the consumer. This is protecting the consumer,
protecting the consumer with online.
Particularly helping the retailers.
Not particularly helping the retailers, no. But the retailers do want us to buy online.
Yeah,
and you might buy something in a few sizes, get it home, try it on and say, actually, I don't want this size and that size, or it's just not suitable. You've got those categories that you tick off when we take things back. It doesn't fit, it's too big, It
just seems already your research covers so many areas. There's an ethical area, there's a legal area, there's a hedonistic area, the pleasure of it, there's a whole retailing thing. It's amazing.
So we do research on the consumer behaviour part. We're doing some really exciting new research now, which will be coming out hopefully in about a year, on how consumers' personalities affect their intention to behave in this way. But also, because here at Cranfield, companies do come to us and ask us to engage in the research, I'll show you some really exciting companies that we've worked with. But it doesn't just come down to de-shopping. It encompasses all of their returns, because they can't identify just de-shopping. They know it's part of the returns problem, but there's a huge aspect of returns. We can get to that slide.
A massive field.
I can explain it to you. I just want to tell you a little bit about the research we did to try and help reduce de-shopping behaviour. So this is called a theory called the theory of planned behaviour, derived from an old theory called reasoned action. It's basically a theory that's been used across different fields, academic fields, to reduce undesirable behaviours, for example, like drink driving, cigarette smoking, risk driving, like using your phone when you're driving. And it basically says attitude affects behaviour. The influence of any social groups around you affects your behaviour. So your friends and family, your religion, that affects your behaviour. And the last one is perceived behavioural control. Ease or difficulty of partaking in that behaviour affects that behaviour. So, for example, if my attitude to de-shopping is, it's okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to be a de-shopper. If I think that's naughty, I would never do that, then it affects your behaviour. We wanted to test that if we changed attitude, we would change behaviour. We also wanted to test if we educated people about de-shopping and changed the perception of people around you that was okay, would it change your behaviour? So we asked, do your friends do it? What do your parents think about it? And you'll see some quotes where we clearly see, my friends are doing it, my parents would tell me off. The influence of other people is very important. And the last one is really important for retailers especially. Behavioural control. Is it easy to take something back or difficult? Because if it's easy to shop online and return
then
we'll try it. But if it's difficult, if there are hoops and strict policies and barriers in our way,
the queue of shame, like you mentioned,
you'll be less likely to engage. So I'll just show you some of the findings. We did regressions for all of these. So statistically, all of these elements proved to be strongly related to their behaviour. So one's attitude, the influence of friends and family, and the ease or difficulty of engaging in the behaviour. And interestingly, we created a new variable called past experience, because people were talking about it's easy or difficult learned by their past experience. So these shoppers were learning that if they went to the till and it was that person they had last time, they might walk out the door and come back.
Themselves.
They educate themselves.
Goodness me.
Yeah, so past experience led to the changings of these ideas. So I didn't want to go into the statistics because it's probably too much for our audience at this time of the morning.
Well, you never know.
Yeah, well, I just thought we'd go through some quotes to just explain some attitude to de-shopping. So the top one, she's a proper de-shopper. I'm going to give it a go. What's the worst thing that can happen? They won't take it back. So there's a little bit about her attitude is what's the problem, which shows a little bit about perceived behavioural control, that it's not difficult. What's the worst thing? What's the consequence? However, the second person, I was wrong. So she knew she was wrong, but she really wanted to go to the party and she really wanted to wear that dress. So they justify it to themselves in this way. Just to highlight the objective norm, so the father was horrified at the amount they took back. This is why you get people hiding their shopping baskets or leaving their parcels to be returned by the door. because they're influenced by other people, which is why educating people about sustainability, returns, customer service is important to reducing this behaviour. The second one, this is how friends learn from each other. I saw my friend do it for the first time, I saw how easy it was, and I thought, I can do this. And this is common and, statistically proven throughout the research. We had loads of quotes like this. So, for example, if your friends are shoplifting, and this isn't shoplifting, you will probably, a few of your friends will be shoplifting and taught you how to do it. And it's the same with this. If your friends are taking things back and they think it's okay, you're much more likely to engage in the behaviour. So I had only one person, I think, with a quote that said, oh, my friends thought I was a cheapskate and I would never do it again. So her friends didn't like the fact that she had partaken in the behaviour. I know the image is a guy here, so lots of the research now is with men and women, but my research these quotes are from was just on women. Right. So just to be clear, that's why I keep referring to them as girls. So in terms of ease or difficulty, this is interesting because returns are getting easier. And since this research, I'd say they've been getting even more easier with the growth of online and the pandemic. People think it's easy because they have so many rights, and that's true. And that's because the retailers are being amazingly generous and trying to create amazing customer service. And the interesting thing is the last point is how they've learnt. You do not need to know your legal rights. You just have to hold your ground. So I think people were realising that if they were arguing with a sales assistant, they would probably just give them the return to take them out of the shop and not have that scenario within the store that looks like they're giving bad customer service. Which is why I like this M&S idea of having it taken off to one side, because when I'm shopping now, I'm always drawn to those conversations around the till where you see people are trying to bring them back and there's a bit of a dispute about whether that should be returned or not in that condition.
Because it's almost as if you're acting, if I stick this out and hold my ground, I'll get something. So you're going in there wanting a fight almost.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But again, perceived behaviour control is it easy or is it difficult? So do you remember I quoted you before on abandonment rates of shopping baskets when online returns are made difficult. So retailers are in this really challenging position to make it easy for customers to bring back, to give good customer service. And then, it's difficult because customers abuse that policy.
Gosh.
So I just wanted to highlight a couple of policy changes more recently. So Costco, for example, which is a large warehouse retailer, they announced that they weren't going to have their returns policy anymore. They were coming up prolifically in my research for people saying they had easy returns policies. So they basically killed it. They started to give warranties with products. John Lewis had this never-ending, they have a never-ending refund policy. They felt that people believed that their products were good quality. And they didn't want people to be nervous. So in COVID and post-COVID, people got very nervous trying to, in the shopping crisis now, people are very nervous trying to encourage customers to spend with us. And I thought this was really interesting in COVID. I talk about Costco again. Do you remember there was a big rush in the UK here for toilet paper? Everybody was buying all the toilet paper. And they had a special policy saying returns will not be accepted on toilet paper, sanitising wipes, etc., etc. People were hoarding these products and then thinking they could take them back afterwards, which would have caused a massive dilemma for big warehouse retailers like Costco. So it just highlights, some of the returns policies and the reopening of stores after COVID. For example, in Greece, after the lockdown, only shops were open for returns. It's a really, really important part of business.
There's a question there then, because it seems like you're throwing up the different retail return policies across all the retailers.
Yeah.
That breadth is really interesting. How do you account for that breadth?
Well, it's really challenging, and this is what the small businesses are saying. We have to reflect what the big retailers do. If Marks and Spencer's or John Lewis say you can return it back any time,
then we've got to do the same.
We have to reflect that. From my research with them, they don't actually want to have the same returns policy as everybody else. It would be great if we worked with the British Retail Consortium, BERA, who represent the independent retailers, and said there should be a standard policy,
a single policy
that we should all adhere to. But retailers don't want to do that. They want to have their own competitive advantage. They want to say, we'll give you the best warranty, come and shop at John Lewis, we'll match the price to anywhere else, and you can always bring it back. We're always here.
So you're never going to get that single solution.
It's a challenge. I mean, I think they do try to find consistency and they do feel like they need to follow each other, but they don't want to have a pure policy for all retail. And I guess it depends in your sector how long that would be.
But we would know where we stand as a consumer. I think it's a standard policy with that shop, I'll just do the same thing. But it's never going to happen.
But there was a clothing retailer many years ago called Morgan who had a very tight returns policy and they closed down. So I think, it's very difficult to maintain great customer service when you're challenging customers all the time.
Just a reminder, please send us your questions at any time.
Yeah,
and we're going to come to the end.
Sorry, so moving on with we're talking about different companies. I want to just highlight two of the big pieces of research I've done since the consumer research with companies. One, we're very lucky to work closely with Sainsbury's. They come and speak to my students every year. And at the time, they wanted me to look at, they're a multi-channel retailer, for those of you that don't know Sainsbury's, here in the UK. They're one of the big three retailers online and in store. They wanted us to look at the returns policy with the theory of planned behaviour, which is what we used when we looked at clothing customers. And we did interviews and questionnaires with their consumers. But what they wanted to do, so it wasn't just about de-shopping, they're aware of that behaviour, but they wanted to be able to stop people bringing their clothing items from that they've bought online into the grocery store for returns, because they didn't feel they had the capacity to handle that. They wanted to help us educate people to drive them to go to the post office. So we did this research with customers, questionnaires and interviews to find out, you know, where do they want to do their returns and why. But what was coming up all the time with these two new variables called time and money. So it's much quicker for me to take my clothing back when I'm doing my food shop in the evening. I don't want to have to go to the post office at lunchtime and get in a very big queue to return something. So attitude and behavioural control become also very important. So is it easy for me to take it back to the supermarket while I'm picking up my paracetamol and my dinner for tonight? Yes, but it's not so easy to get to the post office. And now firms don't want to have all our returns done at work or deliveries to work. So it becomes more of a challenge. So again, that wonderful model that I just explained clearly at the beginning is starting to work again. We need to change attitude. You know, we need to direct customers and educate them that it might be a bit more challenging for you, but we need to drive you towards the post office for these returns because the grocery stores can't handle it all. And there were two new things coming up here, which is the ease of use of the actual returns policy. So interestingly, subjective norm, nobody cared what their friends and family thought. They wanted to return in store and not to the post office. So this is just some ideas of the research and the retailer perspective, and it tends to go a bit broader than de-shopping. They can identify de-shopping in the process, but returns becomes a whole area which needs more precise management.
I was going to ask you about returns, reverse logistics versus de-shopping. There seems to be a blur between the two. One seems to run into the other.
Yeah, so we will do have a logistics team at Cranfield that also look at reverse logistics, which is what they call it, and they look at the handling of that down the supply chain and back in the warehouses. But I'm looking more at the retail managerial perspective and trying to understand the consumer, their intention, their motivation, and hopefully how to manage, educate, change this behaviour going forward. Yes, I wanted to show you this research, Argos. At the time, this research, they weren't bought out by Sainsbury's, but now you can go to any Argos in Sainsbury's. But they were probably one of the largest omni-channel retailers to start off with, which is why Sainsbury's and all the big retailers wanted to buy them, with a huge revenue. They've had 88% of their revenue was from in-store, and 81% of their customers returned via the actual store. They were really concerned with electronic products. And they wanted to improve the process, reduce returns in electronic products, and reduce the product write-off by improving their returns handling of electronic products. I think the problem with the Argos concept is that if you're buying a laptop from Argos or a phone or a washing machine, you didn't have somebody in the store to give you that expertise, how to use this product, all the different variables of the product. You certainly didn't get that in the catalogue, and you certainly don't get that online. So we did research with the organisation. We interviewed lots of managers within the supply chain back end at Argos, as well as customers. I'll show you some of the highlights of the research. So this is kind of how they track returns of the electronic products. Did it break down? Was it an accident? Was it not working? And just some of the things that the store managers were saying to us that we interviewed. If the repair was significant, they felt they had to replace it. There's an example here with a laptop with a crack on the screen. They have to send it away. The engineer has to prove that's accidental damage. They had things like Dyson Hoovers being returned, but they had to go back to Dyson. So they had to work much more closely with the manufacturer to see whether that was a manufacturing fault or a customer fault. And this all takes time. And don't forget that person in Argos isn't an expert in Hoovers or laptops. So interestingly, other big problems that they had, and this was an image that they had given me, was sometimes they get the wrong products in the wrong box. So somebody says, I'm returning my Mac laptop, but actually inside is a Dell. And they also in the interviews then were saying that not all the customers are in the box or not all the right products are in the box. So they get the laptop without the wire. So maybe somebody's bought the laptop and kept the wire. So massive challenges of missing parts. And this is more of the reverse end of the logistics. Several 40-foot trailers are filled with incomplete component parts returned from stores every week. Electric products was a real challenge for them in terms of returns. Some of the things we worked with them closely on was creating, for example, product videos, how to set up your TV, how to plug in your video, how to use the Dyson on this and that mode. Because otherwise, if you don't have anybody like Dyson or Samsung when it's a TV helping you set up that product,
Send it back.
you just send it back.
Yeah.
But they had to get buy-in from the manufacturers like Dyson to work closely with them to help manage this. And I think that's what this research showed. Yes, there's a lot of maybe some naughty behaviour going on, but there's a lot of problems where they had to address at their end, educating customers about the product because they couldn't give that information in store, and also working very closely with their manufacturers. And their manufacturers saying, okay, we'll take it back. We'll make education videos. I remember them saying, we get loads of TVs back because people can't plug them in properly and can't get them to work. So videos was a really good solution to helping them.
Gosh.
So in conclusion, I think retailers need to take a much, much more strategic view about managing returns whilst maintaining customer service. And I think that means, for me, getting involved in the research, finding out how we can educate customers, reduce this behaviour, see what motivates customers, see what problems are prolific for retailers, because just reducing this by a very small amount can make a substantial improvement on the bottom line, and it would be better in terms of sustainability for customers, for our country, for our world. Consume less, consume better, and take these considerations on board as a customer. So we need to work with retailers about educating customers about how to do this, and then monitor it with more research and to see if behaviour is changing. I don't want to be here next year telling you these numbers are going up.
We want you back.
I want these numbers to be going down,
Right.
and I want our research to be impactful, and managing retailers drive this down and help educate customers.
The hunch is that it's not going to improve. What's your hunch?
Well, look, over the last 10 years we've been researching it, the numbers have dramatically increased, but we've had COVID, we've had growth of online. Technologically, there's huge advances, so we could actually track customers better, serial returners better. There's lots of solutions out there. There's also VR, coming into play. Now we have ASOS as one of the pure online retailers that maintains their own catwalk, so we can see how a product moves before we buy it online. So maybe that's reduced returns in a way, because we can see how it moves, how the fabric. It's not the same as touching it and trying it on and seeing if it
Hedonistic
suits you.
points you mentioned earlier on, yeah. But so with more data, you're optimistic by the sound of it.
I'm optimistic that it can be managed better.
Wow.
Yeah, and hopefully it will reduce. But I think with this massive growth of online, there's a massive growth in the behaviour. But also, I'm hoping that some of the new technologies will help us reduce consumption in this way. I've just wanted to highlight the last slide with some references, just to highlight some of the research. There are loads of references in these slides. If anybody would like to read some of the more detailed aspects, please send us an email to the team, and I can send that directly to somebody afterwards, or get in touch with me directly if you would like to get involved with the research, because we'd be delighted to help.
Absolutely amazing. I've learned, I don't know about you, but I've learned an awful lot from that. I knew nothing about it. A whole ton of questions on the text chat, and if you've not had a chance to ask a question on the text chat, please type something, a challenge, an observation. We're very keen to hear that. There are some of those questions, but I got one too. It seems to me you're open for opportunities, for thinking about opportunities. Can deshopping be an opportunity, let's say in poorer countries, where that seems to be something that a consumer could do? Is that an opportunity, or is that a wrong opportunity?
No, it's a good opportunity. If retailers start to think about the returns in that way, that the large retailer that I showed, the clothing garments, was giving damaged items to third world countries. There is lots we can do working with other organisations to try and make sure that our returns become more sustainable. I don't want to hear that they're being burned, like the cases that we heard on the news or in landfill. I want I want retailers to work together with companies to make sure that we can thrift and share across countries as fashions change and seasons change. You know, summer items that aren't sold here can then go to the next summer season in another country. Absolutely, we should be doing everything we can to make sure returned items get full use.
So I guess related to the same question, deshopping and hiring. I guess hiring more retail staff. Does deshopping indicate a need for short-term hiring?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's a brilliant question. So there's a company in the States called Rent the Runway. Rent the Runway.
Rent the Runway.
Yes. So basically, the prom is very big in America. And there's a big company called Rent the Runway where they started doing prom dresses. So your Armani prom dress, you don't want to spend $300 on it for one night, so you hire it and then you return it. But actually, it's become very big in America. Rent the Runway. You get 5 items a month, and you rent these very expensive high-end couture items. I don't know, a suit for work, a dress for an occasion, a smart occasion, then you return it afterwards. So hiring is becoming big.
So that's not deshopping, that's
not deshopping.
Different...
This is a new concept that customers should borrow and customers should rent. And that's not in the UK yet, but it is in America and it's doing very well. It's one I talk to my students about when we teach retailers. So it's a big concept coming through. We have a few companies that do that here, like LK Bennett have LK Borrow, where you can buy a few items. You're not buying them, you're renting them and then sending them back. But obviously there are costs here in getting the products back, dry cleaning them all, putting them back in the shop. They Rent the Runway have stores where you go in, select them, rent them and then return them. And I think this is something where our future is taking us, and I think it's a brilliant concept.
Well, you might have someone in the audience here today that's thinking, you know what, I could make that work. If that's you, we want to hear from you to see that if you've made that work. Again, a ton of questions. This one is from Fagun. Do you think if deshopping as a phenomenon is rising, then maybe it will be smart for companies to start a rental section? So this is the point that you just made, to monetize it and make more ethical rather than fraudulent. So this is not new. This is something that you think is happening. There's a barrier to entering that rental market. What's the problems for entering that rental market? Why don't we see more of those in the UK?
I just think it's just started. I think I first heard about Rent the Runway about 5 years ago in the States. And I think it's coming.
So why is it not here already? It just seems such an obvious thing to do.
Oh, I think it is here. I mean, LK Bennett do it, but you know, we have a phenomenon here called Me Too. So we wait for retailers to do something and see if it works, and then we say, okay, me too.
So Harry met Sally, I want what she's got.
Yeah, so we wait for big players to move in this market in a strategic way, and then we make a decision, me too. And then we see other retailers follow suit.
That's a kind of timidity, but it's interesting. Enno has a question. Enno, thank you for your question. How realistic would you judge that also Amazon would start charging the customer for returns? Because if Amazon doesn't do it, others can't really afford to do this either. So that follow-on thing, could they do that too?
Yeah, so Amazon, sometimes you can have free returns, it depends, because they represent many different retailers and marketplaces now. But yes, people have to be very careful with retailers like Amazon if they're offering free returns. I think I highlighted at the beginning that shopping basket's going to be abandoned if the returns are challenging. So if Amazon do it, everybody else will feel that they have to do it too. Returns on Amazon, I think, are particularly easy, but when we're shopping online, we wouldn't want it any other way.
Lauren's saying, this is a story that she's seen in The Guardian, carries a story this morning about the clothing hire and lending market, online at least. Sounds like the type of behaviour that some purchasers are creating by buying and wearing and returning. Do you have an opinion on how this market will affect online retailers and deshopping, that whole rental thing? Is that going to be a negative impact, or is there another opportunity to be had here?
No, I think if people are going to start renting, then we'll start purchasing less, purchasing things to keep. But I think it's important that we move, especially in terms of sustainability. Like I keep saying, consume less, buy better. You know, the quote from the famous Vivienne Westwood. We know we have to think about what we're buying, especially in terms of sustainability. You know, retailers, whether it's online or in-store, have to move with the changes of consumers. And if there's a push to consuming less, and renting more and buying better and thinking about cost per wear when we're buying an item rather than disposable fashion, which has received a lot of bad press in terms of sustainability, then that's a move we have to make.
So you mentioned sustainability before, and I think Fagan has made the interesting point that, interestingly enough, people also tend to deshop from sustainability and eco-friendly outlets as well.
Of course.
What responsibility should and do retailers have in educating around sustainability? Is that not really their place? That should be an education that someone else does. How do you connect sustainability?
Well, I think we all have to take responsibility, especially companies have to take responsibility for educating people in terms of sustainability. I still think it's hard to say, I want to buy a jacket today and I'm going to go to a large retailer. It's still hard to identify the items that are sustainable because they'll have a few in their line, but it should be very clear which is sustainable. And we should all be moving towards buying more sustainable products.
So it's not a case of deshopping as in don't shop, as in the degrowth movement in terms of capitalism at least.
Yeah.
Don't shop. It's a case of shopping or doing it more responsibly.
Yeah, I think more responsibly, and I think everybody's got a responsibility.
Brilliant. If you've not had a chance to ask that question, please put that question in the chat box. Victoria's saying, egg, her, and by rotation. Not sure if I've read that correctly. They also have a fixed store in Selfridges for rentals. So it sounds like egg, her maybe is the name of the outlet. You said Argos inside of Sainsbury's.
Yes.
So if having a concession or something inside just for rentals. You've come across those, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, it's very good for high-end products. I'm not sure what that retailer sells, but it's brilliant if we're seeing growth of this. It's a new
That's
market.
What you want to see.
Yeah.
This is OSAS, a wonderful topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
How was genuine return accounted for, e.g. bought wrong size, etc.? Also, increases in online sales potentially increases return, even for the right reasons.
Yes, absolutely.
So how do you measure what the reason for return is? I presume you've got countless.
Well, do you remember I showed you the slide with the boxes? There are countless different categories they can tick.
That looked like an online screen of some sort.
That's an online screen at Argos at the time,
right,
to identify why the product was being returned.
Are we talking about 10 different reasons, 20, 100?
Yeah, 20. They have to identify why. But I think so when I go to a retailer, it never becomes a conversation about returns because there's a whole host of things they want to address when it comes to returns because it's such a big part of their business. So I think it's very difficult for them to categorise and say, okay, 50% is returned. It's very hard to say that was deliberately damaged or we've got several items back that have got a hole in the same place, which means there might have been a problem with the seam or the fabric. It's very hard for them to identify that, but they do need to be doing that work at their end, as you can see Argos were clearly doing. But it didn't reduce the problems of these electronic products being part of the highest returns that they had.
Incredible. And OSAS, you must be laughing because I read egg her. It was e.g., for example, her, egg her. No wonder we haven't heard of that retailer. It's her.
Thank you very much. I shall use it as an example in future. Yeah.
There's another question here. A lot of the conversation has covered the ethics and the motivations of those gaming the system. As you mentioned the gaming thing. Whatever new systems industries are developed to reduce the 10% of dodgy systems every year, will those same behaviours inevitably be transferred into the next system?
Absolutely.
What steps do businesses need to do to protect themselves from these behaviours in the future?
Well, I think interesting, you talk about the technology, and I agree, it's a really good point. Hopefully the technology can track behaviour, can track serial returners, and that's what ASOS are doing. And they've been doing it for a couple of years now, and I'm still seeing these big numbers coming out being attributed to high returns rates. So I'm not sure how effective it's being, so we'd have to investigate that in the future.
On that point, we've got about 5 more minutes remaining, so please type that question in if you haven't already. Where is your research going? Where would you like it to go next?
We would really like to invite retailers or anybody challenging with returns or finds this interesting to get involved with us here at Cranfield. We're really engaged and excited about doing research, real impactful research that helps companies improve this. Well, currently, we're doing some really exciting research on consumer behaviour and what motivates consumers to still behave in this way, and that will help us to identify how to change this behaviour a bit better. So we're still looking at the consumer research. We're happy to engage with retailers in their customers, in their fields, whether it's, as you can see, electronics or clothing. We can absolutely do their research in store across the country, across the globe. We're even looking at American consumers currently because it seems to be a bit higher in the States than it is here. So that's a really interesting population for us to look at. Might be interesting to look at a country where returns are lower to try and understand why. So we're interested in all aspects of the research. We really invite companies to come in, all companies with ideas about tracking systems, technology, the use of VR and how it changes our perception to buy and therefore reduce the return. You know, we're open to doing research in any of those areas that help build our centre of excellence in returns and retail here.
Dumb question. I'm allowed one dumb question.
Okay, go on.
You've been talking about B2C principally. Yeah. Is there anything that can be learned from B2B businesses, businesses to business selling?
Well, just for the example I go back to with B2B is like Argos talking about working closer with their manufacturers to try and make sure they're not responsible to educate all the customers to how to create and set up their TVs. They're not responsible to repair all the products. They need to work very closely with the Dysons and the Samsungs to make sure that they help educate customers the right ways with the right products, especially if you're representing a load of different white goods and electronics. So it's really important B2B work together, and we'd be open to the manufacturers if they're interested in the research. If they get high returns from a certain retailer, why might that be? If they get high returns from Argos, for example, rather than John Lewis, why might that be? Does it reflect the returns policies, or is it reflecting something in the product, in the instructions that people, again, don't know how to set up these products? So there is a huge, I think, a new element of research that could be done with manufacturers and retailers that would be really exciting and fruitful to help us understand, educate and change things going forward.
Wow, there seems like no end to the research that you
there's never end to an academic.
And Vincent has also said that in Europe there are economies, or there are parties starting up for that. Grover is an example that Vincent is using. Grover in Germany, I'm not sure if you've come across them.
What do they, a retailer?
It sounds like a retailer, but Vincent, thank you. If anyone here has got an idea or want to check something with them, then Tamira is the person. Tamira is our thought leadership person on deshopping here in the School of Management. So Tamira, thank you. We've got just a few more minutes remaining. I'm just going to do a plug, if I can, to the next event that we have coming up in the Future of Everything series. And the next one is in October, and hopefully you can listen in for this one too.
Absolutely.
This sounds rather strange. The Future of Professional Excellence. But it's going to be a case of my colleague, Professor Andrei Pavlov, Professor of Strategy and Performance here in Cranfield School of Management, talking about, would you believe, philosophy, and I think it's with yours truly as well, around how philosophy can help understand or bring clarity to some of the issues that we're facing, where it's a thorny, massively important, but very difficult to articulate issue, how philosophy can help with that. So we're going to have that event on October the 4th. We really hope that you can do that. Thank you so much. If you had to leave us with one thought, one do or don't or recommendation, what would that be? I'm putting you on the spot now.
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be back in the
really
studio with you.
Something.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be back in the studio here at Cranfield with you. So my one thought would be, if you think it's interesting and if you believe that it's a big, big problem, please get in touch and get involved in the research going forward, because that's the only way that we can understand behaviour and change policy and make things better for the consumers, for the society going forward. And thanks very much for having me. And anyone can get in touch with me here at Cranfield. You know, the emails are published on the website, and happy to follow up with anybody that's interested. So thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Dr. Tamira King, you need to stay in touch with Tamira. Thank you very much indeed. The studio managers today were Robin Hackett and Marco Gomez. The producers were Chris Sordella, Claire Hansen and Kirsty Brown. My name is Toby Thompson. Thank you for watching.
Bye.